Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deeper than just those like made in country labels.
Yeah.
We're diving into the world of global supply chains.
Yeah. It's a really complex world.
It is. And, you sent us this fascinating report,
Yes.
and we're going to break it down for you guys today.
Yeah.
So this report really analyzes the future of manufacturing.
Yes.
And especially this question that keeps popping up. Can any country really replace China as like the world's top P manufacturer?
What's interesting is for decades we've really operated in this made in China world.
Right.
But this report is highlighting a potential shift to what they're calling a China plus many model,
Okay.
which basically means companies are spreading their bets and diversifying production across different countries.
So not like a clear successor, but like a Game of Thrones situation.
Yeah.
With multiple players all like vying for power.
Exactly.
But before we get to all that, let's talk about China.
Okay.
They're still a manufacturing giant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Their trade surplus is still growing.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Despite that, foreign direct investment,
Yeah.
or FDI, in China is actually declining.
Really?
Yeah. Towards the end of 2023, it even went negative for the first time in decades.
Wow.
So that suggests that companies are hesitant about putting all their eggs in the China basket.
Wow. That's a huge red flag for anyone with investments tied to China.
Yeah.
What's driving that decline?
Well, the report points to rising geopolitical tensions,
Oh, I see.
especially between the U.S. and China, as a key factor.
Right.
There's also this growing sense that the business environment within China is becoming more challenging for foreign companies.
Yeah.
Increased labor costs, concerns about intellectual property protection,
Yeah.
and this uneven playing field between foreign and domestic companies
Right.
all contribute to this shift.
So while China might not be disappearing from the manufacturing scene,
Right.
it sounds like their dominance might not be what it once was.
Yeah.
They're not just taking this lying down, though, are they?
Not at all. They're strategically shifting their focus
Okay.
to bolster domestic companies and move into more high-tech manufacturing sectors.
Oh, interesting.
Like think electric vehicles, semiconductors, renewable energy tech,
Okay.
areas where they're making significant investments and strides.
So even with these challenges, there's still a force to be reckoned with.
They are.
But if companies are looking to diversify,
Right.
where are they turning? Is there a clear winner
Yeah.
in this race to replace China?
Well, the report actually debunks this idea of a single next China emerging.
Okay.
Instead, it really emphasizes this China plus many future.
Right.
Companies are hedging their bets,
Yeah.
looking at multiple countries,
Mm-hmm.
each with its own advantages and disadvantages.
So it's not as simple as just finding another China.
Right.
It's about strategically diversifying across a range of different players.
Exactly.
So it's like they're building this more like complex and resilient supply chain portfolio.
Exactly. It's a fascinating shift in strategy.
Okay.
The report dives into 5 countries in particular:
Okay.
India, Vietnam, Mexico, Poland, and Thailand.
Okay.
Each presents a unique mix of potential and pitfalls.
Okay, so let's break down this lineup of contenders.
Yeah.
Let's start with India.
Okay.
We hear a lot about them as like a potential next China,
Right.
but what's the reality?
India definitely has huge potential.
Oh,
They have a massive young workforce
yeah.
and impressive economic growth.
Yeah.
But here's the irony. Despite being touted as this replacement for China,
Yeah.
India still relies heavily on,
On what?
wait for it,
Okay.
Chinese imports
Oh, wow.
for many manufacturing components.
So even those aiming to be the next China are still caught in China's web.
Exactly. It highlights the complexity of the situation.
Wow.
Plus, India faces challenges with low labor productivity,
Okay.
meaning their output per worker isn't as high as it could be,
Right.
even with all those eager workers.
So it's more than just having like a large workforce.
Right.
It's about having the right infrastructure and efficiency
Yeah.
to truly compete.
Exactly.
Okay, what about Vietnam?
Okay.
They've been attracting a lot of attention lately.
They have,
Yeah.
especially in electronics manufacturing.
Okay.
Low labor costs and favorable trade agreements
Yeah.
have attracted companies like Samsung and LG,
Okay.
but they also face a heavy reliance on Chinese imports,
Right.
which creates vulnerability.
It's like they're trying to step out of China's shadow,
Yeah.
but their foot is still stuck in the doorway.
Yeah, a great analogy.
This vulnerability was really exposed in 2024
Yeah,
when the U.S. slapped tariffs on solar panels coming from Vietnam
right.
because they were using Chinese components.
Exactly.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Talk about getting caught in the crossfire of U.S.-China tensions.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is Mexico.
Okay.
What's their advantage in this whole, like, manufacturing game?
Their ace card is definitely location. Being close to the U.S. makes them ideal for nearshoring,
Yeah.
where companies want to reduce reliance on those long, complex Asian supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, Mexico already has a well-developed manufacturing sector,
Okay.
especially in automobiles.
So they've got the U.S. market right at their doorstep.
Yeah,
But are they facing any significant drawbacks?
they are. Water scarcity is a growing problem,
Oh, right.
and there are concerns about energy bottlenecks.
Okay.
Additionally, they face these ongoing issues with like corruption and violence,
Right,
which
yeah.
adds another layer of risk for companies.
So even being the neighbor doesn't guarantee smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic now.
Oh,
What about Poland?
Yeah.
What's their unique selling point?
Poland is actually the only country in this analysis
Oh, wow.
that boasts better infrastructure than China.
Really?
Yeah. They also have a skilled workforce
Right.
and are deeply integrated into the EU market.
Sounds like a strong foundation.
Yeah.
But I imagine being in Europe means higher costs, right?
You're right. Poland doesn't win on cheap labor.
Yeah.
Their workforce is also aging.
Okay.
And immigration is a politically sensitive issue.
Right.
So it's hard to address potential labor shortages.
It seems like there's always a trade-off, isn't there?
Absolutely. Every country faces its own unique set of challenges.
Okay, and speaking of trade-offs, let's talk about Thailand.
Okay.
Okay, bring on the final contender. What's Thailand bringing to the table?
Thailand is known for its skilled,
Okay.
but relatively low-cost labor.
Okay.
They've been successful in attracting foreign investment,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the automotive sector.
Right.
Interestingly, they're also trying to walk this tightrope diplomatically,
Oh.
balancing their relationships with both the U.S. and China.
That sounds like a tough balancing act to pull off
Yeah.
in the current geopolitical climate.
Yeah.
But what about those vulnerabilities we mentioned earlier?
Well, Thailand is highly vulnerable to climate change,
Okay.
particularly flooding,
Hmm.
which has disrupted production in the past.
Yeah, I remember seeing images of that.
Yeah.
Those were crazy.
Yeah.
And what about Thailand's aging population?
Right.
How is that impacting their workforce?
Well, their workforce is shrinking as the population ages,
Right.
which could lead to labor shortages in the future.
Okay.
They are trying to address this through education and training programs
Okay.
to upskill their workforce. But it's a challenge they'll need to keep a close eye on.
So it seems like all these countries have their own set of strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah,
their own unique mix of potential and risk.
absolutely.
But it's clear that there's more to this equation than just cheap labor and location, right?
Absolutely. The report emphasizes that labor costs are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
To really understand a country's manufacturing potential,
Yeah.
we need to look at a concept called economic complexity. Think of it like this. Think of it like building with Legos.
Okay.
A country that only exports raw materials is like having a box of just those basic bricks. They can't really build anything too elaborate or unique.
Right.
But a country with a diverse and sophisticated range of exports,
Okay.
especially in high-tech sectors,
Mm-hmm.
it's like having a box filled with all those specialized pieces, gears, connectors, sensors.
Right.
They can create much more complex and valuable creations.
Okay, that's a much more interesting way to think about it than just a dry definition.
Right.
So the more diverse and specialized a country's exports are,
Yeah.
the more economically complex they are,
Exactly.
and the better position they are for long-term growth.
Precisely. And it's not just about the products themselves.
Okay.
It's about the knowledge, the skills, the interconnectedness of different industries within a country.
Right.
It's about having this robust ecosystem that fosters innovation and resilience.
So where do these contenders stand in terms of economic complexity?
Yeah.
I imagine China still leads the pack.
You're right. China does have a significant head start.
Okay.
They've been strategically moving up the value chain for years and have a very diverse export basket.
Yeah.
But some of these other countries have a long way to go.
Okay.
India, for example, still relies heavily on those basic Lego bricks, lower value added exports.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And China has a good lead.
Mm-hmm.
But these other countries aren't just standing still.
Right.
They're investing in their capabilities.
Right. Absolutely. Vietnam, for instance, is seeing really strong growth in electronics exports,
Okay.
which are higher on that complexity scale. They're
Okay.
moving beyond just basic assembly
Yeah.
into more sophisticated manufacturing processes.
So even with their dependence on Chinese components,
Yeah,
they're making progress.
they are.
But with all these contenders vying for position, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, right?
Right.
Geopolitics,
Yeah.
how are those global power dynamics
Yeah.
impacting this whole manufacturing landscape?
Geopolitics is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
It's intertwined with supply chains in a way that companies can no longer ignore.
Okay. The report really underscores that point.
Okay.
Trade agreements, tariffs, political alliances,
Yeah.
even conflicts, they all have this ripple effect
Right.
on the flow of goods and investments.
So it's not just about finding the cheapest labor or
Right.
the most convenient location.
Yeah,
It's about navigating this complex web of global relationships.
exactly.
It sounds like a strategist's nightmare.
It can be.
What are some concrete examples
Yeah.
of how geopolitics is playing out in this manufacturing game?
Well, the most obvious example is the U.S.-China trade war.
Right.
Those tariffs and restrictions imposed by both sides
Yeah.
have pushed companies to diversify away from China,
Okay.
which has in turn benefited countries like Vietnam and Mexico.
Makes sense. Companies don't want to be caught in the crossfire,
Right.
especially when those tensions show no signs of easing.
Exactly.
What other examples stood out to you from the report?
Well, the war in Ukraine really highlighted the risks of over-reliance
Oh, yeah.
on a single supplier for critical goods.
Yeah.
It was a wake-up call for a lot of companies,
Right.
prompting them to prioritize resilience and diversification
Okay.
in their supply chains.
It's a stark reminder that global events,
Yeah.
even those seemingly far removed from the world of business,
Right.
can have this dramatic impact on manufacturing.
For sure.
So we've got this fascinating mix of economic factors,
Yeah.
these unique country-specific strengths and weaknesses, and this overlay of geopolitical risk.
Right.
What does this all mean for the companies involved?
It means companies need to be far more strategic and adaptable than ever before.
Okay.
They can't just chase the lowest labor costs or assume that existing trade relationships will remain stable.
Yeah.
They need to carefully assess those geopolitical risks,
Mm.
build flexibility into their supply chains,
Right.
and constantly reassess their strategies.
It sounds like a high-stakes game of chess,
It is.
with each move having potentially huge consequences.
Yeah.
But let's zoom in a bit.
We've talked about these countries broadly,
Right.
but what about the specific challenges they face?
Yeah.
What are some of the things holding them back
Yeah.
from reaching their full manufacturing potential?
Let's start with India.
Okay.
Beyond their reliance on Chinese components,
Yeah.
a major hurdle is their infrastructure
Right.
while they're making progress.
Okay.
Logistics remain a bottleneck.
We hear a lot about India's infrastructure challenges.
Yeah.
How does that actually impact manufacturing on the ground?
Well, think about it. Getting raw materials to factories,
Yeah.
transporting finished goods to ports, all of that becomes more expensive and time-consuming
Right.
when the infrastructure isn't up to par.
Yeah.
In fact, the report points out that logistics costs in India
Oh.
can be as high as 18 to 20% of total production costs,
Wow.
compared to just 8 to 10% in China.
Wow. That's a significant difference.
Yeah.
And I imagine those unreliable power grids we often hear about in India don't help matters either.
You're right. Inconsistent access to electricity is a major problem for
Yeah.
any manufacturing operation.
Right.
And as India ramps up its manufacturing capacity,
Mm.
those climate change impacts we mentioned earlier, droughts, extreme heat,
Yeah.
will only put more pressure on their already strained infrastructure.
It's a reminder that these seemingly separate issues,
Right. Yeah.
from climate change to infrastructure,
Yeah.
are all interconnected and have a very real impact on manufacturing.
Exactly.
So India has some serious work to do.
They do.
What about Vietnam?
Okay.
What are their biggest pain points
Yeah.
beyond their dependence on Chinese imports?
Well, they also struggle with infrastructure constraints,
Okay.
especially in transportation and logistics.
Okay.
Plus, their energy infrastructure is vulnerable
Yes.
to disruptions from extreme weather events,
Right.
which can throw production schedules into chaos.
So it's not just about having low labor costs.
Right.
It's about having the systems in place
Yeah.
to support a robust manufacturing sector.
Exactly.
The report also mentioned some political instability in Vietnam, didn't it?
Yes. That's a newer development that's
And-
causing some concern.
Okay.
Recent corruption scandals have rocked the government,
Wow.
leading to high-level resignations.
Really?
This uncertainty about the future direction of the country
Yeah.
is making investors nervous.
It makes sense. Political stability is crucial
Yeah.
for companies looking to make long-term investments.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about Mexico?
Okay.
We touched on their water scarcity issues earlier.
Yeah.
What are the specifics there?
Water scarcity is a major challenge for Mexico,
Okay.
and it's already impacting industrial production in key regions.
Oh, wow.
Several states are facing severe water stress,
Okay.
and it's only projected to get worse
Right.
as climate change intensifies.
Yeah.
This means companies operating in Mexico will need to get creative
Okay.
and invest in water conservation efforts
Right.
to make sure they have a reliable supply.
So it's not just about finding cheap labor.
Right.
It's about ensuring you have access to those essential resources.
Yeah.
To keep those factories running.
Absolutely.
What about those energy bottlenecks in Mexico?
Right.
How serious are those?
They're a significant problem.
Huh?
Mexico's energy sector is heavily reliant on fossil fuels,
Okay.
and their state-owned oil company is facing major financial and operational challenges.
Wow.
This has led to energy shortages and price volatility,
Okay.
which makes it difficult for businesses to plan ahead.
It seems like Mexico's proximity to the U.S. can only take them so far.
Right.
There are still these fundamental challenges they need to address.
Yeah.
Okay, on to Poland.
Okay.
What's preventing them from becoming a true manufacturing powerhouse?
Well, as we said earlier, their labor costs are significantly higher than in Asia.
Right.
They're a developed economy
Yeah.
with higher wages and living standards,
Mm-hmm.
which is great for their citizens,
Right.
but makes it harder for them to compete on price alone. Plus, their workforce is aging, and finding ways to address potential labor shortages will be crucial.
It's that trade-off again, isn't it?
It is.
Higher wages often mean higher costs.
Right.
But it usually also means a more skilled and educated workforce.
Exactly. And Poland has a very skilled workforce,
Yeah.
which allows them to focus on higher value-added products
Yeah.
that can command a premium price.
Okay.
But even with that advantage, they're not immune to the challenges of water scarcity.
Wow.
It's a problem affecting countries all around the world,
Right.
and Poland is no exception.
It's amazing how this issue of water keeps coming up.
It is.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of these global challenges.
It does.
Okay. Last but not least, let's revisit Thailand.
Okay.
What are their biggest vulnerabilities?
Well, like many countries, their reliance on Chinese imports is a concern,
Okay.
especially as U.S.-China tensions escalate.
Right.
They're also very susceptible to climate change impacts. We've seen how devastating those floods can be for their manufacturing sector.
Those images of flooded factories are hard to forget.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of the very real threat that climate change poses
Yeah,
to global supply chains.
for sure.
And what about Thailand's aging population?
Right.
How is that impacting their manufacturing workforce?
It's a growing concern.
Okay.
Their workforce is shrinking as the population ages,
Mm-hmm.
which could lead to labor shortages down the line.
Yeah.
They're trying to address this through education and training programs
Okay.
to try and upskill their workforce.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an ongoing issue that requires a long-term strategy.
So it seems like all these countries are facing this balancing act,
Yeah.
managing those unique strengths and weaknesses as they navigate this new manufacturing landscape.
Exactly. It's a dynamic situation
Yeah.
with a lot of moving parts,
Right.
economic conditions,
Yeah.
technological advancements, and those ever-present geopolitical factors are all shaping the future of manufacturing.
That's what makes this so fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
It's a constantly evolving puzzle,
Yeah.
and there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely.
But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah.
What should they be thinking about
Mm-hmm.
as they consider the implications
Yeah.
of this China plus many world?
Well, first and foremost, the era of relying solely on China for manufacturing is fading.
Okay.
Companies are diversifying,
Right.
and this trend is creating opportunities for other countries to step up.
Okay.
But it's not a simple game.
Yeah.
Each country has its own unique set of advantages and challenges.
Right.
Understanding those nuances is crucial
Mm.
for companies looking to make strategic decisions
Right.
about where to source and manufacture their products.
It sounds like companies need to approach this
Yeah,
with a much more strategic and nuanced lens than in the past.
absolutely. They need to carefully assess those geopolitical risks. Prioritize resilience and flexibility in their supply chains and constantly reassess their strategies as the landscape shifts.
And for anyone following this topic,
Yeah,
it seems like staying informed about these trends is crucial.
it is.
What happens in one corner of the world can have ripple effects
Absolutely.
across global supply chains.
I agree. This China plus many trend is reshaping the manufacturing landscape,
Yeah,
creating both opportunities and complexities.
right.
And as we've seen, those geopolitical factors are only adding to the intrigue.
This has been such an insightful deep dive so far.
It has.
Thank you for breaking down this complex topic
Of course.
and for highlighting those key trends and challenges
Yeah,
that are shaping the future of manufacturing.
my pleasure.
Where do we go from here?
Well, to really understand this China plus many
Yeah.
world, we need to look beyond just those broad country-level trends
Okay.
and zoom in on specific sectors.
Okay.
The report delves into how each country is specializing. And that's where things get really interesting.
Wait, so let's dive into those details.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's get into those details. I'm really curious to see how these countries are carving out their own, niches in the global manufacturing scene.
Yeah.
What's the report highlighting in terms of those sector-specific trends?
Okay, let's start with India.
Okay.
They're making a big push in electronics manufacturing,
Okay.
particularly smartphones.
Okay.
They've rolled out policies to attract foreign investment in the sector, and they've actually seen some pretty impressive results.
I've heard about that. Haven't they dramatically increased their domestic smartphone production?
They have. In 2010, India manufactured only about 1% of the phones they consumed domestically.
Wow.
Today, it's a staggering 99%.
That's a huge leap.
Yeah.
It sounds like a real success story, but I can't help but think back to that reliance on Chinese components
Right.
we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
How does that play into their electronics ambitions?
It's a key challenge. While India is assembling those phones domestically,
Yeah.
they still heavily depend on China for critical components,
Very
like
good.
semiconductors and displays.
Right.
This makes them vulnerable to supply chain disruptions
Right.
and those U.S. tariffs that target Chinese goods.
So it's a step in the right direction,
It is.
but they're still walking a tightrope.
They are.
What about Vietnam?
Okay.
We're focusing on similar sectors.
Vietnam is also heavily invested in electronics,
Okay.
becoming a major hub for smartphone production.
Okay.
Samsung and LG, for example,
Yep.
have set up large-scale manufacturing facilities there,
Right?
drawn in by those low labor costs and favorable trade agreements.
So they're directly competing with India in
Yeah.
that space.
Yeah.
But again, I have to wonder about that dependence on China
Right.
for intermediate goods.
Yeah.
Is that a major concern for companies operating in Vietnam?
Absolutely. The report highlights how U.S.-China tensions create this tricky situation for Vietnam,
Okay.
especially in sectors like solar panel production.
Where they've been accused of using Chinese components
Yeah.
to bypass those U.S. tariffs.
It seems like trying to step out of China's shadow
Yeah.
while still being entangled in their supply chains
Right.
is a real dilemma for these countries.
Yeah, it is.
What about Mexico?
Oh,
What's
yeah.
driving their manufacturing growth?
Mexico has a long-standing strength in automotive manufacturing,
Okay.
and that sector continues to be a major draw,
Mm-hmm.
especially as nearshoring gains traction.
Right?
Major car companies are setting up shop in Mexico
Yeah.
to produce vehicles closer to the U.S. market.
So they're leveraging that geographical advantage.
Exactly.
But I keep thinking back to those water scarcity issues we discussed.
Right.
How is that impacting their automotive sector,
Yeah.
which presumably uses a lot of water?
It's definitely a concern,
Okay.
especially in water-stressed regions.
Yeah.
Car manufacturing requires a significant amount of water,
Right.
and those shortages are forcing companies to get serious.
About conservation measures
Yeah.
and to look for alternative sources.
It seems like sustainability is no longer just a nice to have,
Right.
but a critical factor in these manufacturing decisions.
Absolutely.
What about Poland?
Okay.
What sectors are they focusing on?
Poland is making a name for itself
Okay.
in the electric vehicle battery market.
Oh, interesting.
They've landed some big investments from companies like LG and Northvolt,
Okay.
who are setting up large-scale battery production facilities there
Oh.
to serve that growing European EV market.
So they're tapping into that green technology wave
Yeah,
and positioning themselves as a key player in the future of mobility.
exactly.
But those high labor costs in Poland must be a factor.
Well, they are, especially when compared to countries like China or Vietnam.
Right.
But Poland's focus on high-value products like EV batteries
Yeah.
allows them to command a premium price
Okay.
and offset those higher labor costs to some extent.
So they're leveraging their skilled workforce and focusing on sectors where quality and precision are key.
Yeah.
It's a smart strategy.
It is.
Okay, last but not least, Thailand.
Okay.
What are they specializing in?
Thailand has a diverse manufacturing sector.
Okay.
But one area that stands out is their strength in electronics and machinery parts,
Okay.
particularly those used in semiconductor production.
Interesting.
They've become a major exporter of these components,
Okay.
which are in high demand globally.
So they're playing a crucial role in that global tech boom,
Yeah,
even if it's not as visible as assembling the final products.
right.
But how is Thailand's aging population impacting their manufacturing workforce?
It's a challenge they're grappling with.
Okay.
As their workforce shrinks, they're facing a potential skills gap.
Okay.
The government is investing in education and training programs to try and address this,
Okay.
but it's an ongoing issue that requires a long-term strategy.
It seems like all these countries are facing this balancing act,
Yeah.
managing those unique strengths and weaknesses
Right.
as they navigate this new manufacturing landscape.
Exactly. It's a dynamic situation with a lot of moving parts.
Right.
Economic conditions, technological advancements,
Yeah.
and those ever-present geopolitical factors are all shaping the future of manufacturing.
That's what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a constantly evolving puzzle.
Yeah.
And there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has been.
Thank you for breaking down this complex topic for us
You're welcome.
and for highlighting all those key trends and challenges
Yeah.
that are shaping the future of manufacturing.
My pleasure.
For anyone listening out there who's interested in learning more about these trends and challenges,
Yeah.
be sure to check out the report that we've been discussing today.
Yes. It's a great resource.
We'll include a link in the show notes.
Perfect.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right.
The global manufacturing landscape is constantly evolving.
Yeah, it is.
So stay informed.
Stay
Engaged. And be sure to join us next time for another deep dive into the world's most pressing issues.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, thanks for listening.